This episode is brought to you by our wonderful sponsors at Griffin Air Conditioning. Visit them at griffinair.com.au. The great ones, they're different. They really are. Not better, just different. Sure, there's a physical power, a mental strength, a complex but resolute constitution too. There's a whole lot more than just the measurables. That's something else, that intangible. It separates us from them. Welcome to the Legends series on Andy Raymond Unfiltered. They call him Rowdy. Doesn't say much, but what he does say, it matters. There's a parallel to how he played the game, all in, all the time, without the fanfare. But who is Chris Lawrence?
Well, who is Chris Lawrence? Probably that question's probably changed over time, but I suppose Chris Lawrence is someone who has always loved rugby league, always been passionate about sport, always valued the importance of family and have a very close family and friend network who respect and I'm very loyal to. I suppose those things haven't changed, but I definitely have changed as a person as I've got older and experienced a lot of things as a lot of people do. But probably someone who, I suppose Chris Lawrence is someone who's been able to learn from their experiences and adapt themselves personally and professionally.
You played in the Campbelltown area as a kid. You went to the famed St Gregory's College. Who shaped you? Who mentored you at Greg's?
A lot of my coaches did St Greg's, but I reckon it was probably a lot of my time spent playing junior footy for Eagvale St Andrews. I was fortunate enough to be coached by my uncle, who's now passed away, and he played first grade football for West Magpies, Marshall Rogers, and having him coach me when I was young, and just having his input and having a family member, be able to be honest with me, and really help me, and without trying to be biased, he was always trying to help improve my game as well as the team's. Both him and a couple of other coaches I had, Kevin Chambers, who was the father of one of my young schoolmates, and I still remember, I think he was coaching, Parramatta A grade or something at the time, and then coaching these junior sides. But these two coaches just really taught me everything about footy. My dad sort of played footy as well and played lower grades for Roosters and Newtown, and I learned so much off him. But he was always wary. He didn't want to be a coach and be biased. He always sort of stood back and probably only, I suppose, offered his assistance when I asked it. He didn't really want to be that overstepping the mark in that type of parent. But again, I was fortunate enough to have those couple of coaches and who really taught me, and it actually gave me the opportunity to play a lot of different positions when I was young. And that was a thing that they did with a lot of the junior players, which, and again, I don't know now what a lot of junior coaches do, but
I don't think it happens a lot now.
Yeah, because I found that so beneficial because I learnt about what each position was. Yep. And even though, as a young kid, you're not doing, say, at the fullback, you're not doing the positional play like a Billy Slater does in first grade, but I learnt from these guys when I did play fullback, how to read where the kickers are and just the concepts of what it takes to be a fullback. Yep. And then when I was, playing at lock, what you have to do at lock or what you have to do at 5'8". And obviously that changes as the game evolves, but it just gave me a really good understanding of the basics of the game and positionally, what I had to do. So I credit a lot to those guys, and then coming through St Greg's, being able to not only the coaches there, but the past players that had come through there, and being coached by these coaches. So a lot of the coaches there, lend on the experience about some of these players. Like Ryan Hoffman was in year 12 when I was in year 7, and so when we were coming through as if you're a young forward or you're doing, you were training, aspiring to be a first grade player, a lot was, say, reference to Ryan Hoffman and saying, look, he went straight into, West SG ball and then got picked up by Melbourne a year later, he's playing first grade. So talked about some of his work ethic, some of his training habits and things, and utilising, some of those things. So it's definitely a really good grounding, I wouldn't be, we've had a 15-year footy career if I didn't sort of have the support and the education and the football education that I did, through my junior club there at Eagvale. And, I was fortunate enough to only ever play for one junior club, and that was Eagvale St Andrews. Played a number of years there, and then just on St Greg's and on first grade.
You actually made your NRL debut while still at school. We'll wind back the clock to Sunday, July 30, 2006, round 21. It was the West Tigers playing the Brisbane Broncos at Suncorp Stadium in front of 31,500 people. You were on the wing, jersey 18. What do you remember most of the day?
Oh, the thing I probably remember, and I just remember scoring a try, and everyone goes, obviously, you've just scored a try. What were you feeling? You didn't celebrate, you didn't do anything. What were you thinking? And all I had going through my head was, I go, imagine what my mates are sitting there doing. They're going nuts at home, and I'm just thinking about what they've done. Okay, they've probably got on me for first try score as well, and young 17-year-old kids. I go, wonder how much they won, and just those random thoughts. But honestly, I remember running out in the warm-up, and the stadium was half full at Suncorp Stadium, and I was just like, wow. And because it happened so quickly, I wasn't even supposed to play. It was only going up as an 18th man, and then Paul Federer got injured. So because it was only a few days between knowing I was playing, quickly rushing and signing a contract, getting my dad to sign it because I was an 18, and it sort of just happened so quickly. I didn't have time to think about it, and then before I knew it, I'm running out, and it's warm-up, and then I took it in, and then if I thought that crowd was big when I ran out for kick-off, packed house at Sunday afternoon at Suncorp, it's pretty surreal. And then probably the other thing, again, the quirky sort of thing that stood out to me was, I think, the second set, or I can't remember whatever set, but there was a long kick, and Darren Lockyer put in just a clearing kick, and as he kicked it, I'm just waiting there to catch it. And I just sat there thinking, oh my God, I'm about to catch a kick that Darren Lockyer has just kicked.
Yes.
I'm thinking that, okay, Darren Lockyer is just kicking a ball to me in a game of footy.
Very cool.
Just when, those type of thoughts going through, but it's pretty surreal experience.
Did you go to school the following day, Monday morning?
I had an English exam the next day. So I had at 9 a.m. I had an English exam the next day, and it's a funny story because I worked very hard at school, and I did quite well at school. And I remember after the game, my parents were there and really proud of me, but they sort of said, look, you got exams, you trial HSC exams starting, don't throw it all away, just finish them. You've done a lot of hard work. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. And sort of going off track, but that's probably from there. That probably cemented some of the values that I took through my whole career. But
great parenting. Yeah,
and so I got on the plane because it was Sunday afternoon, so we flew straight back to Sydney. So I got on the plane and sat next to Chris Hyington. So sitting next to Chris Hyington, he's just going, oh, what a game. How good school going to be tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah. And then we stopped talking, and then I sat down, got my bag open, and got out some study books and started studying. And he just looked over next to me. He goes, what the fuck are you doing? I said, I've got an exam tomorrow. He goes, mate, put that shit away. Yes. He goes, mate, just enjoy it. He goes, mate, not often you get to beat Brisbane, score a try and debut. He goes, mate, just enjoy it. So I was like, oh, okay, sweet. So I put him away. But next day, turning up to school was actually weird because obviously it was, Tigers won the year before, so it's a topical thing. So I've, went from a nobody to your cameras are waiting outside of school. So I'm driving in school, and then the people holding off cameras from coming into the school, and I'm like, obviously I knew they were for me. I was like, oh shit, what am I in for? I just, wasn't ready for that, and obviously getting to see all my mates was pretty cool. So it's pretty hard to concentrate for that exam. But leaving was probably the hardest thing, because I left and then had cameras following me, and we went down to a local Macca's, which we did as a 17-year-old kid. After an exam, we sat down at the local Macca's, and then getting shots and taking photos. And I actually had the club speak to me after that. Not that I did anything wrong. They're just like, you got to be mindful of what you're doing now, where you're at. And it was a pretty big lesson, because I was like, well, so what? I'm just down at Macca's. That's what we do is, kids in Giltinan. Like, there was no cafes to go sit and have a coffee. We're just sitting and having a feed down at Macca's after we finish an exam. So yeah, it was quite a whirlwind 24 hours, like in everything that happened that short space of time.
Physically ready, yes, in most cases. Mentally ready and mature enough as a young man. That seems to be the trouble, or maybe a better terminology is the biggest adjustment that most find. Was the mental aspect of going from schoolboy to NRL superstar difficult?
Yeah, I think initially, I think definitely the mental side of things. For me, it was dealing with not so much the pressure, but the attention.
Yep.
I was never one that really liked the attention. And again, I went from, being a nobody to on back page of every major news paper, on TV, then talking me up. And then the next week, we got flogged by Melbourne. And then, and I still remember to this day, so Dave Kubel, who then did a bit of assistant coaching at the Tigers, who's a champion bloke, and I said to him, I still remember my second game, I'm taking my first scoot, and you're yelling out, Lawrence, left foot step, left-hand carry, he's going to, and he's calling exactly what I'm going to do. And
wow,
like just name-dropping what I'm about to do before I did it. And I'm just like, oh, shit. And just got hammered, and then I think Greg Inglis scored 4 tries that game.
That was a reality check.
And it was just
too.
like, wow, this is first grade. Like, it was such a reality check. And then even after that, then the bit of negative sort of, the negative media attention as well. And then it was like, just understanding, deal with that. That was hard, and I had to learn really quickly how to deal with that. I dealt with it with my own way. I was lucky at the time. I'm still doing my HSC exam, so I was like, you know what, I could take my mind off it by just focusing on studying. So if I focused on something else, and it did, and it helped me for the rest of that year, and again, something I took forward throughout my whole career.
Griffin Air Conditioning offers the highest quality of air conditioning sales and service across the Sydney metropolitan area, providing installation and maintenance to commercial, domestic and industrial customers. Working with this team, you'll be guaranteed the latest services, technology and developments in the industry. Visit griffinair.com.au and tell them we sent you for a cool deal.
I think physically, I don't think I was ready either. Like, I look back at it. I look back at it now, and at the time I thought, it's not that big a deal. Yeah. But I don't know what the other boys must have been thinking, because I did a couple of training sessions with a couple of junior guys in the school holidays, just again experience. But I probably had only done 1 or 2 full training sessions with the team, and I was a scrawny little 17-year-old kid with long hair, and I was like, if I looked at, say, a team now and a skinny 17-year-old kid came in, and then the coach goes, he's playing this week, I would be like, mate, what are you doing? You can't be throwing this kid in. So I can't imagine what those guys must have been thinking. But at the time, I didn't think anything of it. And I think physically, to play 1 or 2 games, I'm definitely ready. But I definitely don't think I was ready for week-to-week first grade. And probably sort of the start of the next year, probably the reason why Tin Sheens, he started me in reserve grade, and which I, at the time, I was not angry at, but, at the end of I missed the first part of the preseason with Australian schoolboys, but then I thought, I'm ready, like I finished a year, but he's like, he goes, I want you to go back and prove you're a first grader. So I'm glad he did that, and I played the rest of that year, 17 games or whatnot, and I still think the back end of the year I struggled. The body couldn't cope with it week to week, and that was again back then. So I look at now, and it's the week to week, and I think probably the back end of my career, probably that took a toll on my body a bit, just not having been conditioned to handle week to week. 2 or 3 games here and there I would have been able to handle fine, but I think the physical week to week and being your best, I definitely don't think I was ready for.
You mentioned Aussie Schoolboys. What an amazing year that was, your debut. Aussie Schools at the end of the year. Chris Sandow, Joel Thompson, Aidan Tolman, Israel Folau, Timmy Manor, Mitchell Pearce, Kevin Proctor. Who was the standout? Who was the one that was always going to be the superstar?
Oh, Israel. Yeah.
Was he?
Yeah, he was always and Piercy. Yeah, like he just dominated in in junior football, and it wasn't other guys dominate because of their speed or their strength or his passing game, and a football ability and the ability to just read defence and anticipate things at a young age was just so far above anyone else. He was. I in the New South Wales schoolboys to make the Australian schoolboys, I played fullback in that tournament, and I just remember playing against him in the competition to make that, and I thought if I get picked in this side, I'm just running off him all day. I'm just sticking around him because he just I did that. I used to hang inside him, inside balls, or when I saw he used to have that spiral ball, he could hit someone on the chest and from 20 meters. So he just had those skills so early on, and then showed that again the Australian schoolboys. But yeah, Israel was just he was all class. He's obviously a big body, but again he wasn't one of the fastest going around, but it just his ability to beat someone one-on-one is just so hard to tackle one-on-one. But yeah, I think even with that side, you could sort of see that pretty much everyone was gonna or have an opportunity to kick on because everyone was pretty grounded, pretty down to earth, and had a really good work ethic, and you could just see the talent in everyone. So it was a great tour of England, and got the win over there, and plenty of good players coming out of it.
It'll be over the next few years. You're one of a rare breed, mate, that combined professional sport and study. What were you studying?
Well, I studied straight out of school, and again, this is where it probably started from my parents, and the fact that the first couple of weeks of first grade, being able to then focus on just finishing my HSC actually took my mind off all the media attention, and actually grounded me. And I was like, you know what, I need to do something because I actually found it a good escape. It was more escape, not so much helping me play better. I just needed to escape it, the attention, and I found it a really good escape. So I enrolled into a XIII sports science degree at Sydney University. I did quite well in my HSC, and I had a real passion for sort of either health, fitness, or business, and I sort of wasn't sure which path I was going to go down. So I went down the health, fitness sort of side, and a couple of my mates were doing that. So I thought, okay, well, that makes it easier. They're doing it as well. So enrolled into that, but I got a year and a half into that, and it wasn't for me. I still remember, and again, when we talk about experiences you have and that you're glad you have, I'm glad I went through this period because there was I can't remember, I think at the end of the first year, I had a subject that I couldn't go to any tutorials for because I was always training because I was now training full time, and I was at Sydney Uni, and at the time, this is when there wasn't the elite athlete programs, well, not for the league players anyway. There's probably some for the union players, but and I said to the unit coordinator, I can't attend any of these training sessions. Any of these tutorials, and the response was, well, you're at Sydney Uni, you don't get to say this is the prestige of being at Sydney Uni, you get told you got to do this. And I said, well, okay, but I physically can't make it. Like, I play rugby league. And the response was, well, can't you ask your coach to change training? And I was like, but like the footy on TV, like the one you watch. Yeah. And I just still remember the conversation. It's like, well, you got to work out your priorities. And I'm like, I have, and that's my priority. Yeah. Like, and I was lucky enough that the tutor at the time was really good. Said, look, don't worry about, I'm not going to fail if you're not coming. I'll try and give you as many resources as I can, but you're going to have to try and do the work. And then it got to the end of the year. We had a final assignment due for that subject, and it was due on a Monday, and I got picked in the junior kangaroo tour, so we were away for 2 weeks. So basically got back on the Sunday, and I have a assignment due the Monday for a subject I hadn't been at and hadn't learned anything. And I asked for an extension from the unit coordinator, and she gave me 3 days, and I said, okay, I'll do it. So got home, did the assignment, but just used all my mates' notes because they were in it. So I used my mates' notes, wrote it myself, but used some of their diagrams, and got failed for plagiarism because I used their diagrams, which is fair enough. Yeah. I did write it myself, but use their photos, diagrams, didn't reference properly, and to be honest, I just didn't have time to do it. So I thought, oh, it's better than sending nothing in. And I just remember then getting called in and having this big interview with the dean, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is, I'm trying to be proactive and do the right thing, and the barriers are just barrier after barrier. So I just said, look, this is not for me, and I said, look, I'll quit. It's not for me. So I stepped away from it. I had a really bad experience with education there. So, but it was probably the start of me thinking, well, there's no education design for athletes, and that probably started that process. And it took me then a while then to get back in. Okay, what can I, get in baby steps, get back into education, because it did help me. And the year that and the time when I didn't have anything to focus on, I found myself thinking too much about footy. And this was even before social media was really prevalent. So, you're not like now. It's just you can't get away from it. And if I thought I couldn't even get away from it then, can't imagine what it would be like now. So it sort of started me on my journey about, okay, well, one, what can I do next, and then sort of grew into my business.
And as we sit here in 2021, your focus is no longer on footballers. You're retired, but your focus is on footballers and the football industry and your business. We might be going out of order chronologically here, but it's time for the One Solution promo, I guess. Yeah,
so we're fortunate enough to start One More Being in 2013 and partner with the sort of One Solution group, and sort of at that stage in the previous years before, I had got back into education and had completed my after the university did my certificate 3 and 4 in fitness, and did that online, and my business partner, who we'd started a little sports coaching clinic company, he went and did his certificate 3 and 4 in fitness via TAFE, so two sort of different ends of the spectrum. But there was, for someone who was pretty self-motivated, it was really hard, no support, and there was just nothing.
You're listening to Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legends series. We have corporate and private sponsorship packages available. You set the terms. For further information on how you can become part of the team, go to the website andyraymondunfiltered.com.au and hit the sponsorship tab.
After a couple of years of running, the sports clinic business, we sort of then progressed, and we thought, well, there is no education programs or institutions that deliver educations for athletes. So we decided, well, we want to be able to cater for athletes, so let's start delivering a Cert 3 and 4 in fitness to athletes and helping them through that particular course, because I used it as a really good way, a stepping stone to get back into education. My business partner was the same. He went to uni. It wasn't for him, poor experience in education. And for a lot of athletes, what we find is, and this was the case more so from my business partner, is that he was told he was a footy player but never made grade, played reserve grade, but as a 15, 16-year-old was the next gun, told he was going to be the next big thing, so disengaged with education. Just switched off from school. Then the reality hit 22, 23 that, hey, not everyone makes it. And then it's time to re-engage. And then, but there's no confidence in learning because it's, you haven't done anything for 5, 6, 7 years. And that was the story for a lot of athletes.
Wow.
So we're like, well, what's the most relatable thing for athletes? It's fitness. All athletes have a certain level of competency in fitness. Otherwise they wouldn't be, a semi-elite or elite athlete. So
that's right.
It was a really good stepping stone, and I felt and he felt, to help athletes get back in and re-engage with education, number one. And then we thought, we can use that, but then we can try and work out what's the best ways to deliver education for athletes. So we started, delivering that over a number of years. Then we then go, we need to know more about athletes. So we started just doing a bit of research to help us better sort of serve our athletes, and that sort of three-month project turned in 3 years. Ended up partnering with Western Sydney University, had their our data academically published in the International Journal of Sport and Society, called Empowering Elite Athlete Education, and basically showed what's required to achieve positive education outcomes for athletes, and then use that data to basically reshape a structure to deliver education for athletes. And now, again, here in 2021, we're constantly changing and evolving how we sort of deliver education for athletes. We've put close to 650, but I think we just gave 650 athletes successfully through education courses, and predominantly in the NRL. Obviously a lot of years just NRL, so still probably in terms of total numbers probably 70%, 75% NRL. Last couple of years obviously now into all other major sporting codes in Australia, but it's about, again, understanding the specific needs of athletes, and even just the changing nature in the last, even before COVID. But we're finding, again, one of the things with the research and why athletes were failing at university, because it was such a long period, and to commit for 4, 5, 6 years when things change so much as an athlete. Athletes get 2 or 3 years in and then we just drop out, and the stats were showing that. So we identified 12 months was the ideal length. You needed 12 months. And then even the last 2 years, we started noticing that became less and less, because the nature of sport was that, contracts meant nothing. Guys getting tapped on the shoulder. So they were signing contracts or off contract, not knowing, well, I don't want to sign up to a 1 or 2 year course, because I'm in Sydney now, I could be in North Queensland next year. Right. I don't know where I am. I'm off contract, I don't know. So, just understanding the needs of athletes, and a lot of other, education institutions, whether that's universities or vocational providers, again, don't specifically do that, because athletes only make up a small percentage of their market. So it doesn't make sense for them to reshape the whole model just for athletes. And that it doesn't make sense. But a lot of other, that they are understanding not only athletes, but how other people, in terms of, in just sort of the general population, how things change very quickly. So we've had actually a lot of discussions with a few universities and vocational education providers who actually use some of our research to now introduce in their courses
very cool
exit points. So a lot of unis have now, like a 3-year degree, you have an exit point at 1 year if you still can walk away with a piece of paper, and you can walk away with a diploma or a graduate diploma because of some of the research to show, hey, look at the reason they're not going through that, because circumstances change 2 years in and they can't finish a uni degree. So it's pretty cool to sort of see how and where that business how that has developed and how it started, because it started with, again, having a bad experience in education, knowing how by engaging in something that actually allowed me to escape from, at the time it was media, but throughout my career I was escaping from, social media, poor form, injury, being able to clear my mind when I was going through a tough time. And it just really helped me. And I really truly believe I wouldn't have played 15 years if I didn't have this, and not only education, but then later on have a business that I could build and focus on away from footy. So I credit a large part of, I suppose, my longevity to that.
Social media, hanging with the mates, playing the poker machines, playing Xbox on the lounge for far too long. It seems to be happening more with young footballers. From your experiences and using your experiences as a gauge, how important is it, not only maturing as an athlete, but maturing as a young man, to have that release, to have, even at the very least, a very basic understanding and investment in a program that's going to better you?
Yeah, and I think it's just about trying to grow as a person. If you're growing as a person, you're going to play better. You're going to grow, evolve, learn. So it doesn't necessarily have to be education. It might be, okay, well, I'm going to find an interest area and delve in that. I'm going to do community work. I love, helping people and working in the community. It's going to help grow my skills as a person and help, make me a better person. Because again, that at the end of the day, that's how you can have a long footy career. You got to keep evolving. You got to keep, not just playing wise, but as you mature, and as you get more experience. So it's really crucial that athletes understand that. But the thing is, and I know myself, even though I was proactive in it, when I was young, and the wellbeing and education officers, even though I don't think there was many around at that sort of time, but spoke about, look, life after sport. When you're 21 and 22 years of age, and you're like, well, I don't have to worry about life after sport now. I'm only 21, especially if your young kids sign a contract, which is fair enough. And to be honest, and in speaking with a lot of athletes now, they say, oh, I don't have to worry. And I go, yeah, you're right. You don't have to worry about life after sport now. But I talk to them and go, but do you want to perform at your best week in, week out? Do you want to have a consistent performance? Do you want to grow yourself as a person, increase networking, commercial opportunities? They're like, oh yeah, of course. I'm like, well, that's what having a interest area and developing your off-field things does. Other studies have started to show that athletes that engage in off-field initiatives are picked in the top side more often to have longer careers. So the research is there to show that's the case. So it's like, well, don't worry about 10 years' time, but to be like, at some point you're going to be injured, you're going to be off contract, you're going to maybe be dropped, you're going to play terrible, you're going to get sprayed on by the media and social media. And if you're a player who thinks that's not going to happen to you, you're kidding yourself. It happens to every player. So it's going to happen eventually. So how to help you maintain your performance? So it's not about life after sports, but how do you get the best out of yourself now? It's by doing that. And for some, it's education. Some might want to go and invest in start a business with some other people. Others, it's, I'm going to do renovations on my house, and have an interest area in there. Others, it's, again, community work. It doesn't matter what it is, but they've got to find ways to grow themselves and grow their skills as a person away from sport.
2010, your first final game, you backed up a good year with the Tigers with selection in the Australian squad for the Four Nations. Was 2010 your best year?
I look at 2010 and as the sort of point where I started to take that next step and go to the next level. I was at the time, at the back end of sort of 2009, I was selected in the sort of the squad, the Four Nations squad, but didn't make the final team. I had an injury at the back end of the year, and just even being in that sort of initial train-on squad gives you that bit of a taste. And then sort of started the year well, and I think I was 18th man for the Origin sort of series that year, and then that sort of, at the time I was disappointed because I thought, I was playing well enough to sort of get picked, and but then, obviously it wasn't the case. But then again, knowing you're sort of in the mix, it gives you that bit of motivation. And then towards the end of the year, I actually broke my jaw about 3 weeks out from the semi-finals, and then that knowing we were sort of sitting in the top four, and I was just rushing to get back, and I missed that famous game, the first semi-final against the Roosters, where Braith hit that field goal, and I just remember sitting there thinking, if we win this game, we're through. Because I think with the result the night before, I knew we'd have a week off. Yeah. So for my jaw, which was only 2 weeks ago, I'm like, I'd be safe. I'll be back for the semi. And then sitting there, then we lost the game. Then for me, I had to make a decision, knowing, do I play next week, knowing the surgeon said, look, it's not fully healed, and let my teammates down, or like, is it what's going to let them down more if I play, get injured, or don't play my best, or if I don't play, because we had a lot of injuries out of that game. So there's like Benji was busted. There's a lot of guys playing busted. If I don't play and we lose, so it was only young, but it was a tough decision to make. But end up sort of playing. Didn't probably play my best game, especially defensively. I was still pretty tentative going into. As you would be. I think it was 3 weeks almost to the day that I'd broken my jaw, had 2 plates put in, and then came back and sort of played. But I thought, I'm not going to. And we sort of went down to Canberra and beat Canberra, and only just won, hang on, and then got through to the prelim against St George the next week. But that was obviously one that sort of got away and went close for that. But again, I was, I sort of, to be able to then get picked in the Four Nations squad, was unreal. And I knew that there was, I think, Greg Inglis was playing left, and I think there was the right centre position. No, I think he was injured. So it might have been Brent Tate, I think, was playing right, and Willie Tonga was playing left. And so he started the tour, and then the third game, I got my chance to play against New Zealand, and I actually played all right, and we beat New Zealand. So then there was like, going to the last game, have I outplayed Willie to get in there? And unfortunately, I didn't get picked, and so he got picked, and then unfortunately, New Zealand come back and beat us in the final. But again, being in around that mix, then that next off season, just got me so focused on sort of what I needed to do.
From experience, amazing highs. The end of 2010, your football world would come crashing down. March 26, 2011, Campbelltown Stadium, you suffered an horrific injury. What do you recall of the incident that dislocated your hip?
Yeah, I just remember, again, it was just a standard hit up off the scrum. And I just remember getting twisted in the tackle. I actually watched it. I actually watched the video yesterday because I put it into a lot of workshops I do, not only with athletes, but do some educational mentoring workshops and things like that in the corporate space, just sharing my story. And I bring sort of that video up. Every time I watch it, I don't understand how it happened. Like, I just watch it and think, it's just one of those things, foot must got caught in the ground. But yeah, and I knew I dislocated my hip straight away. And then the the physio came on. He's like, "What have you done, mate?" And I said, "Oh, I dislocated my hip." He's like, "You sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fucking sure." I just knew.
Wow.
It felt just all pain. So it definitely, that was the most painful injury I ever had, for sure. And yeah, just getting carried off and into the sheds after the game, trying to get as much of the green whistle down, get the morphine in, anything to take the pain away. Because the hip was still out for, I think, it was probably over 3 hours that it was out.
What happens in a situation like this, mate? Because it is extremely rare in professional sport. Dislocated fingers get put back in, dislocated shoulders get put back in. What happens with a dislocated hip?
Well, some guys who, again, it is pretty rare, but again, and now in speaking to a lot of doctors, they say depending on how it dislocates, some can sort of pop out and pop back in. It depends on people who are very mobile. But I definitely wasn't a mobile person, so once it was out, and it was and just the way it happened. So got to the hospital and I was like, "No, you got to knock me out. I don't want to be awake. Knock me out when you put it back in." And then they were like, "Yeah, it's because it hasn't gone back in. You need to be knocked out, fully relaxed to get the joint back in." And it took 5 or 6 doctors and nurses, a couple of them standing on my chest, a couple of pulling on my leg to get back in. So yeah, that was, but at the time, and I didn't realise it's probably to a day later when I found out that it's because it was out for, I think if it's out for more than 2.5 hours, your risk of losing the blood flow to your leg increases, and I can't even think of what it's called, but essentially when the blood flow dies to your leg and you need a hip replacement. So I was out for about 3 hours, so doctors basically said, "Look, there is a chance you will need a hip replacement, like as in now, like as in this year." And they said, "If that happens, your career's over." And I was like, "What?" And they said, "But we won't know. We'll have to scan you again at 3 months. And if the blood flow's fine, you're sweet. If it's not or it's reduced, then yeah."
The Legend series is a deep dive not only into the athlete but the man behind, celebrating successes, dealing with failure and turning obstacles into challenges. It drops at the start of your week. Later in the week, the weekly Wodge is released. On any one episode, hear up to a dozen of the game's best, both former and current. We talk footy, we have a laugh as well. Segments, specials and special guests. It's the perfect way to kick off your footy weekend. Then on Sundays, one-on-one with not a footballer in sight. We chat with boxers, mixed martial artists and professional wrestlers, both past and present. The list of names featured reads like a who's who. Their stories simply amazing. Make sure you're following us on our social media pages, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, all at The Andy Raymond. And subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. That way you won't miss a thing. And before you go, we'd really love a 5-star rating and review on the podcast app you're currently listening on. It helps us spread the word and grow the brand as we look to bring you more. We're giving away an Unfiltered Truckers hat for the best weekly review too. Andy Raymond Unfiltered. It's a podcast like no other. It's unfiltered. Make sure you come back soon, legends. This episode is brought to you by our wonderful sponsors, Galaxy Finance. Sponsors and personal friends that I trust enough to go to with questions about my own finances. That's not a sales pitch, that's fact. Any questions, any queries, they have the solutions from home loan lending to complete financial planning. With official interest rates at an all-time low, the lenders want your business. With Galaxy Finance, they'll do all the work for you and find the best possible deal. They'll do it all. Get in contact, ask for Leanne, and mention Unfiltered for a free chat. A free chat. No obligations, a free chat just by mentioning Unfiltered. galaxyfinance.com.au is where you can find them. Welcome back to Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Chris Lawrence story. Previously, we spoke about the transition from schoolboy star to first grade, his early education that would set up his post-career business, and the amazing 2010 season. The story continues.
No, so I basically had to wait 3 months to know if my career was going to be over and whatnot. And as I went through the rehab, I sort of, everything felt right and everything, applied myself pretty well. And I sort of knew deep down it was going to be fine because I just felt the body. I'm like, no, everything feels fine. So, and again, was fortunate enough that it was fine. But yeah, it was a tough old period where I sort of had a lot of uncertainty.
Do you think it was over?
Well, when I heard that, yeah, I was like, well, because then I'm like, it's out of my control. Like, if I need a hip replacement, I physically can't play. So, but then, probably the next week was really tough, like mentally, just dealing with that uncertainty. And then I just remember having a chat to, another physio I was sort of seeing at the time, and he was a mate as well. And I just said to him, mate, what's the quickest anyone's ever come back from like a hip dislocation? And he's like, oh, I don't know, mate, 3 months. I said, all right, I'll come back and play in 90 days. And he goes, mate, like, to be honest, your season's over. Like, we'll just, you'll be back. And he's been positive. You will get back, but, we'll just let this season go and whatnot. And I go, no, like, just give me something to work towards. At least as a goal I can just focus on. Because I knew, even with other stuff, with, having education, business, things I was doing, if I had something I could really focus on, took my mind away from this.
You're goal-driven.
Yeah, I'm like, well, just give me a plan. Just give me, every week, give me some targets I've got to hit. And so then every week I got something to... Otherwise I'm going to go into training and rehab and go my season. And I'd seen guys, in rehab. I hadn't at that stage had a really, really major injury in my first grade career. I had small ones and been in rehab, but seeing guys with shoulder recos, knee recos, and how lonely it is in rehab when you know your season's over. And I'm just, and knowing too that one, I just played for Australia the year before. We went close to winning a grand final or getting a grand final. I knew we were going to be thereabouts again. And I'm just like, that's the last thing I want to. So just give me a bit of hope. So he did that, and I was just like, I'm just gonna everything, like anything he said to the letter I did. So I didn't miss anything. Like it was as if he said, do this amount of reps at this amount of time, and I was doing exactly what was prescribed to try and do everything I could to get back.
Amazingly, you would play again. Amazingly, you would play again that year. What do you recall of your comeback game? It was July 8th. Mindset as well as any physical concerns?
Yeah, mindset was fine because, the hip actually didn't feel, after probably the third or fourth week, it just felt like a big bruise. Just felt like I was corked. So it didn't feel that bad. And obviously there was a lot of torn muscles and things around that. So it was just a matter of just strengthening them again. So once I was out running, it took a while to get to the power back and stepping off that foot. But in terms of, I didn't, because it wasn't like a contact sort of injury or thing. And it was it wasn't really something that, again, at the time, gave me any worries or anything like that.
Did you have any restrictions or limitations physically post the dislocated hip, or were you able to replicate, I guess, levels you were at prior to the injury?
Oh, it definitely stopped a lot of the range in my hip. Yep. So in terms of probably not takeoff speed, but probably like max acceleration, being able to open up, the term open up and whatnot. it was reduced because I was restricted in that, and it was probably other injuries probably over the next sort of few years that took away that takeoff speed. But and again, it was just getting back into it, and the agility side of things was probably more a confidence thing to once I knew I could, really step off at either side, things came back fine. It probably difference too, because I was again I then probably bulked up a lot more. Put on, so naturally I was going to do that anyway. Like my dad playing reserve grade went from a fullback to a front rower throughout his career, and he's a big unit. So I knew physically I was always going to...
Back row was for you?
Yeah, Tim Sheens, I think second or third year told me, he goes, you're going to end up either a 5'8" or a lock, I'm just not sure. He goes, you won't stay in the outside backs for too long. So he sort of picked it early on. So I knew I would, and that sort of period when I was in rehab, and especially the first month where I couldn't do any lower body, it was just all upper body, and I really put on good size and strengthened my body up. So, putting on a bit of weight, a bit of muscle, and then obviously having that lack of speed probably took that, bit of speed away from me. But then probably what it did do, it meant from probably then on and before that was known as a really attacking player, but was suspect in defence. But from then on, I think my defence, I was probably known for my defence because physically I was strong enough and I could dominate with my defence. So, it definitely sort of changed the way my game was played.
You're a one club man, very proud of that for the West Tigers. It wasn't always and hasn't always been easy for the Tigers. You played under a number of coaches. The spotlight has always been on the club. Many would say unfairly with the criticisms. But whatever way you look at it, the focus has been extreme. Difficult or easy for you to deal with?
Oh, definitely difficult. Difficult early on. Fortunate enough, I suppose, unfortunately, that because I have experienced a number of different situations at the Tigers, you do get used to it and you do know how to handle the different situations and how to remove yourself and just, worry about what you can control and things like that. It is tough because, again, the first 6-7 years of my career, it was one coach, the similar playing group, from probably 08, 09 through to 12. It was similar. There wasn't a lot of changes and we're a really tight-knit group. Like those guys in that period, some of my closest sort of, footy mates to date, that I can call and catch up with, and it's like sort of nothing, ever happened. A lot of guys who are, and usually, and even chatting to, guys, again, like Chris Warrington, who has been to a couple of clubs and, won a grand final, another club and whatnot. And you took a lot of people, and even the boys who in the 05 team, they talk about how tight the 05 team is because of that bond. And a lot of those guys speak about, considering we didn't win a grand final in that period, the bond between the guys is pretty close. So then when that started getting split up, that was hard. And then you throw in, obviously, a change in coach, and then obviously poor performances, and just a snowball effect. And it probably just shows how hard it is to, one, be a successful club team, but then to maintain it, knowing you have to make the right decisions, you have to have the right people, you have to, have luck with injury go your way. You just have to make sure everything's right because things can change quickly, and it was the hardest part was with a lot of it because especially as players, we're front and center. When we're gonna put our hand up, and when we're accountable, we're accountable by our teammates, family, friends, media, social media. Like everyone sees if I miss a tackle and let it try in, I can't hide from that. I've got to put my hand up and go, that's not good enough.
Others in their job can hide though.
But I think it's not so much others in their job can hide. It's, I suppose, others ensuring that the decisions they're making are the right ones and they're doing the right thing, I suppose, for the club. And just making sure that, again, if I wasn't performing, I'm in reserve grade. If I don't get signed or, anything like that. So, and the thing is, again, we have to perform. And if the buck stop, a lot of the time, fairly or unfairly, they say the buck stops with the coach, but really it should be the players. And that, again, we're the ones performing. The coach, 100% has a massive influence, and everyone has influence. The trainers have an influence. The recruitment managers have an influence. Like, everyone in the club has an influence, but we're the ones out there playing. So if we're not doing the job, whether that's physically, mentally, at working as a team, we need to do that. And again, the hardest thing was because we weren't getting results. There was such a turnover of players, and when you get turnover of players, it just makes it hard to gel, and then you don't get the results, and that was always the hardest thing from that period. Just everyone was training hard, everyone was doing their best, but then there was just at times felt like sometimes when you were working that hard, you were digging more of a hole for yourself, and you just didn't have the answers. And again, later on, when you sort of start to later in my career, when a lot of these things happen, it's just about, other things you can't control. And I think, too often, whether that's myself or, other people, you worry about everything that's going on, and that affects then your performance. Whereas if you take all that aside and just go, just worry about what your role is and just do that. And again, if there was, I get asked a lot, like, what's the problem that over the last 10 years? What's the Tigers? Is it the players? Is it the admin staff? Is it the coaches? What is it? What's the problem? And the answer is, if I knew the answer, I would have changed it 10 years. Like, I would have made it, like, if it was that easy an answer, people brighter than me would have made that decision or that change long ago.
Griffin Air Conditioning offers the highest quality of air conditioning sales and service across the Sydney metropolitan area, providing installation and maintenance to commercial, domestic and industrial customers. Working with this team, you'll be guaranteed the latest services, technology and developments in the industry. Visit griffinair.com.au and tell them we sent you for a cool deal. You had a reputation as a professional, as a tough player with a tough mind. To you, was the mental aspect of rugby league equally as important as the physical?
Yeah, definitely, and I think more so now. I think what you'll find I think especially over the next 5 years and going forward, that the gains and the differences between the good and the great and those who have short careers, long careers is going to be their mindset, how they apply themselves, again with the preparation, but just how they can have clarity and be really clear in their head, because more than ever there's so much external noise, so many distractions that for those who can really be clear mentally, get through the tough times and just block out all external distractions, they're the ones that are going to have long careers, because realistically, physically, every side's doing the same thing. Every side's doing the same training. You pretty much look from 1 to 17. There's pretty much everyone's got similar body type now. From wingers to front rowers in the gym, you're lifting, within 5-10% of each other. So everyone's got the same strength. Even some front rowers are just as quick as wingers now. Yeah. So physically, there is not a lot between anyone across the board, except from obviously a couple of people that are just really quick or really strong. The freaks. Yeah. So everyone's that. So where's the I suppose that 1% edge, and it's in the mindset and being able to each and every week have that clarity to be able to perform your role and not take on the baggage of other things going on.
Let's go back to the beginning of 2019, and I could easily read out the facts that were reported of your horrific injury. When, where, how? I'd probably rather you begin this part of the story.
It was in New Zealand 2 days before the first trial. So we played a trial in New Zealand playing against the Warriors, and it was just a routine training. It wasn't even a full contact session. It was just a couple of days out for a game, doing some plays against each other, the reserve grade versus the sort of first grade side, and then one of the players sort of poked their nose through, and then me and Benny Madalena have come in either side to sort of make a tackle, or bodies in front, and both gone behind. He's dropped his head. I've sort of raised my head, and the sort of top of his head's just gone crashed into sort of my cheekbone, and just the angle it got. Basically, what the surgeons, it just imploded. My face imploded. Basically, it got me at the weakest point, the sort of hardest point of his head, got the weakest point of my face. And it was essentially that. And I knew one straight away. I knew I was injured. I'm like, hit the ground. I was like, it's my. But I didn't realize how bad. And I thought, first I thought it was just my jaw. Then I could feel my cheek. Then I felt my nose and my eye. And so then I just felt everything caved in. So it was, as sort of I sat there, I sort of felt everything. And in terms of, it was definitely painful. Everyone asked me what was more painful. In terms of actual pain, I think the probably hip was more painful.
Yeah.
But the hip I was playing, and then within 5 minutes I had a green whistle. Whereas this, I had to sit there because again we're in New Zealand, and there was actually an ambulance strike on at the time. So. Which was the physio kept, mate, they'll be here in 2 minutes, they'll be here in 3 minutes. And he's like, mate, I've got no idea. Eventually he goes, you could be here for a while. So probably not so much the pain that was the issue, because all the blood was rushing down the back of my throat because of all the bleeding, internal bleeding. I was actually struggling to breathe. So I remember when he's told me that, I didn't panic a bit. I sort of thought, if I panic, I'm in a bit of trouble here, because he was like, it could be a couple of hours. Like, I don't know, like, just get your head around how long. So I'm like, all right, I've just got to worry about just breathing, because like I was like, sort of every now and then I'd cough and choke on a bit of blood going down. So I'm like, don't worry about the pain, just worry about it. So just did that, and fortunately it didn't take 2 hours, but we I think another 40 minutes later the ambulance came and
felt like 2 hours.
Shipped me off to hospital.
What were the injuries? Can you recall all of them?
Well, pretty much every bone in my face. So there's 12 different fractures, straight all the way from the eye socket down the cheekbone and jaw on both sides, across the nose, both eye sockets, the front jaw, or the palate. And the only thing that wasn't was the bottom jaw. That's probably the only thing that wasn't broken. Pretty much everything else had a fracture in it. And putting it back together, it was basically like a facial reconstruction, and the surgeon sort of said it was like putting a jigsaw puzzle back together.
So you're in hospital in New Zealand, and your wife, Catherine, flies immediately over to be by your bedside. Do you remember the moment she walked in to the hospital room? She walked in, burst out crying, and said, "You're never playing footy again." And I go, "Yeah, okay." And then about a minute later, I go, "Oh, we'll see." So it was, she was quite upset. I told her the morning she was flying over, so look, don't be alarmed. Like, I'm gonna look, it's not gonna look good, but I'm okay. Like, I'm okay. And I sent a photo to my family of me, and didn't send it to her. I didn't want her worrying on the flight over. But my family and friends were obviously quite worried. But and like she sort of said, "You're not playing again." I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And then it was, I don't know what it was. There was something there that I was like, and even at that stage, and it was only as I unpacked, a bit later on over the next sort of few weeks, I was just like, "No, I'm not done yet." Like, and I said to her about a day later, I go, "Look, if the surgeons say there's no risk if after all my recovery," and at this stage I didn't even know, it was a lot of uncertainty because they couldn't tell me when I was going to get surgery, what the surgery was. Like, I still didn't know. Like, I had no idea. I was just sitting there and they couldn't tell me anything. But I said, if eventually a surgeon says once everything's done, there's no risk of re-injury or, whatever, I was like, I want to give it a crack. And she was like, no. And then eventually she goes, "Oh, okay." And I don't know, and for her sort of saying that was probably a big reason why when I made my retirement, when I announced my retirement, I sort of thought the time's right, because she could have turned around, like, we had a 2-year-old daughter at the time, could have turned around and said, "Nah, like, think of your family, like, don't be selfish. You've been selfish for, as a footy player, you've got to be selfish. You've got to think about yourself and do your own preparation. Like, your footy and your preparation for your game comes first. And if it, like, as selfish as that sounds, if it doesn't, then you can't beat your best." So she could have said no, but was like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And I sort of didn't really realise at the time why I wanted to come back. I'm like, everyone said, "You're crazy. Why would you?" Like, I'd,
Robbie Farah and all my teammates just going, mate, why come back? Like, what do you got nothing more to prove? You got nothing more to do anything? And yeah, I was just like, I don't know. They just got that fire in the belly that just felt like if I could, and again, if I'd be completely content if I was told I couldn't.
Yes.
So it wasn't about that. It was about if I could, like I want to prove that I can. You know, I still got it. I want to prove that I can, and it wasn't until later on I was like, you know what, a lot of it was about my family, even though you would think it's probably the opposite, that to not play because you fear family, but I just wanted to be be able to get back on the field, because at the time my daughter wasn't only just turned 2. She wasn't old enough to know that I played footy. I'm like, I want to get back on the field and have her be old enough to understand that Dad played footy, and be out in the field with me running around, whether it's my last game or whatnot. So that was just because I wasn't going to achieve anything more in the game, like, because the back end of my career getting slower and weaker. So in terms of personal accolades, there was nothing really that I was going to achieve aside from probably that the fact I did that and I got to share moments with my daughter, I'll cherish those sort of memories forever.
And no doubt she will as well. You're listening to Andy Raymond Unfiltered, the Legends series. We have corporate and private sponsorship packages available. You set the terms. For further information on how you can become part of the team, go to the website andyraymondunfiltered.com.au and hit the sponsorship tab. Were you concerned about Emmy's reaction to you?
Yeah, well, I was, and initially she didn't recognise me, but again, it got me a bit upset. But I think a lot of that is probably because I was away for 3 weeks, and as a not even, well, she was just 2, 2-year-old kid. You go away for a bit, and I'd come back and I'd black eyes and my face was swollen and whatnot. So yeah, look, there was that bit of it was more, she didn't recognise me coming back from the surgery, because the surgery had like sort of tape on my face and stuff over my nose, and my face was swollen, so she didn't recognise me after that, and that was, and because that took so long to heal. But then, so I was worried about that. But then it was a tough period after the surgery, because for 6 weeks I couldn't do anything. I couldn't sneeze, exercise, anything to put pressure on the face. They said you can't do anything for 6 weeks, otherwise, the little screws and things will pop. You got to make sure you don't do anything. So, and again, I'm a proactive person, like doing things. So 6 weeks at home doing absolutely no training or anything was hard. Fortunately, I got to then spend, work in the business, but I got to spend a lot of time with my daughter, day in, day out.
Watch a lot of Dora the Explorer and the Wiggles.
Plenty of Wiggles at that stage before then she got introduced to Frozen and then all the other things. So, but it was good. So I got to spend a lot of time at home with her. As much as it was a really tough time, and then I had my bad days and days where I just was down and things like that, but it was sort of good quality time I got to spend with her.
Mental health, did you have mental health concerns? Did you have, toxic thoughts on those days that were difficult? Yeah,
definitely. Like I think, and even now, and even sort of before that, I was always been a sort of a big advocate about, starting the conversation and about mental health, and I'd been a Beyond Blue ambassador, and understanding that, people go through troubling times and and difficult circumstances, and being there for support and just, and understanding that it was okay to be in a bad period and dark place, and all you needed to do was, reach out for support. And at the time, a lot of that was more to do, and again, it probably took me to put things in perspective to sort of help me get through it, but it was a lot to do with my appearance. Like at probably the 4.5 or 5 week mark, I hadn't eaten solid foods for I think 2 months, so I dropped 13 or 14 kilos. So the structure of my face looked different. Like I just looked a shadow of myself. So I didn't look like myself. But then, like every day when I got up, and I still had bruises and things weren't healed and things like that. But then I looked at myself in the face, in the mirror, and I just like I just didn't look like myself. I'm like, I didn't even know who I was looking at, and I was like, your face is like your identity, and I was sort of looking like I've just felt like I've lost that identity, and it was more that sort of I've lost my identity, like, and that's where I struggled to sort of grapple and deal with, and things like that, and they were the sort of times when I had those sort of bad days, and it's probably just I think it was one day where I went in to see the surgeon. I was just really just frustrated and tried to vent and whatnot, and I thought he just had done a bad surgery job, but it's just because things hadn't healed and whatnot, and it was more just then after that going and just being in the hospital and just seeing other people in the hospital and seeing kids in there. I'm like, what am I like? I'm not sick. Like I've had a surgery. Like just pull your head in, and it's sort of that. Yeah, that sort of is what I needed. Just put it in perspective. I'm like, so what? Like, I still got my health. I'm not sick. Like, look at everyone else. Like, all it would take for me to go through the cancer ward at the Children's Hospital to really put things in perspective. So that got me back on track. But in terms of them, but understanding like, and even sort of now with a lot of work we do with athletes, we do run sort of mental health short courses, and I'm learning all the time and learning about support systems and even different traumas and things like that. And at the time, if you had said, oh no, you have showing symptoms of post traumatic stress, I'm like, no, I'm fine. But you look at some of the up and down bad days I had and things like that, and I'm like, yeah, I probably did, to be honest. Like, not realising it, but learning more about it and things and what you can do and understanding it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're suffering, from long-term depression or anything like that. I just, for that particular event and period, I was, it's a sliding scale, your mental health, and it's not something that is fixed and stays the same way. You slide up and down every day, and it's a constant, work. So, just understanding that it was all, I'm going to have bad days and have good days, and just learning how to get myself back into the right mindset.
The comeback, or even the thought of the comeback, let alone the physical act, stupid or stubborn or determined, or is this simply that intangible element that separates you elite guys from the rest of us, the inability to surrender?
I think there's a little bit of that in all athletes. I think that's why... you are a professional athlete, and especially those who hang in there for a long time, you would have had to go through some adversity and at some point had to hang in and defy the odds of something. So again, I think that's in all athletes. For me, again, it was probably because I had that sort of that drive, and I knew, and again, it was simply the fact that probably I want to prove people wrong, but it was more I wanted to get back, and I wanted to, again, just share that moment with my family, my daughter, because I didn't get to do that the previous year, and and it wouldn't mean kicking stones if I didn't, but I'm like, that would just be great. I hear ex-players and players go, it's such a good moment when you get to have your kids on the field and things like that.
Makes sense.
So that was, and it was literally as simple as that. I'm like, no, I just would like being a dad now. I just want that. That's what I want. So, and it was more the fact because my reasons sort of outweighed the fear of getting re-injured. That's, and again, probably understanding more about how to overcome fear and things like that. And again, I love learning. Always want to say, even through this process, looking at, mindset strategies, ways to deal with things, overcoming fear, just different things, and learning about and having an awareness of what I'm feeling and what that is all about. And I just understanding that, when everyone goes, aren't you fearful of getting re-injured? I wasn't, and I didn't understand. No, like my first contact session, I got back in there in the wrestle room, and the guys were sort of like cuddling me and like didn't want to tackle me because they were like afraid of re-injury me. And I said, like, honestly, I can't dip my toe in the water. I just got to dive in, just whack me. And so I just ran full steam. They belted me, put me on my back, and just got up and did it again. And everyone's like, you're crazy. But I didn't know why. I didn't fear. I'm like, I don't care about getting re-injured, but understanding because I wanted to get back on the field more than I feared getting injured. Yep. That was the sort of reason. So, and I knew if it was in my hands, I wanted to do everything I could. If it's taken out of my hands, then so be it.
After achieving so much, after returning from so much twice, after facing adversity and winning, why retirement so shortly afterwards? Have you actually already answered that by ticking the box with Emmy?
Yeah, pretty much. I think, and because mentally and physically, it did, like, because I had the drive and the wire, but that 2019 year took its toll. Like, I was pretty spent by the end of the year. And I was off contract at the end of the year, and I did want to go again. Like, I did have that drive to go again, because, again, I'm like, well, I don't want to. There was still that drive, even though, I had got back after my injury. That fire was still in the belly, and I knew I had still a lot to offer from the team. From my experience.
And they wanted you too.
Yeah, they did, and it was just a matter of, at that time, couldn't get it done, and it was I just had to be patient and wait. So there was that stress as well about first time I'd basically hadn't had a contract, so I was technically not off contract. I didn't have a contract in my career, and when you've got a mortgage and you got bills to pay and things like that, and you're like, well, and I was fortunate enough, I had my business that had grown and developed, but I was, in terms of planning when I'd hopefully roll into it, it probably wasn't at that point where I could just go straight into it and provide myself an income. So that was a stressful time, but I knew I wanted to go in 2020, and then I sort of in the back of my head thought, look, this probably would be the last year, but I was always open to it. And then COVID happened, and when COVID happened, I was one of the guys involved with the discussions with the Players Association and the advisory group with the NRL and Peter V'landys, and initially they were sort of telling the players, like, we're hearing like it's gone, we're over. So I'm like, in my head I thought, look, I could be retired. So literally in that 6 or 8 week break, I was getting up at 5 a.m. and just working the business, because I'm like, you know what, I just acted as if I was retired and set myself new challenges, new targets, and then when we came back and got back into it, and we got back into training, and I didn't miss it. I didn't miss it as much as I thought. I got back into it, and I was like, I didn't really miss it that much, and that was probably the first sign. I was like, I didn't miss it. Then got back into playing. Then physically, the body took longer to recover. Yep. And it was just, I thought, you know what? That side of things isn't going to get any easier next year. And for me to then still compete at this level, I'm going to have to put in more preparation. Like, I don't want to just cut corners, and because that'll show on my game. And I've always been one to do, I do all the preparation. I know I've done it right. And the question was, do I have the motivation to put my body and mind through that for another year? So, July this 2020, could I see myself in July 2021 still be doing that? And the answer was no. So that was it for me.
It was a fitting reward that in the final month of your career, you notched up 250 games. I know it wasn't part of your decision-making process, but it's a nice one to have.
Yeah, it was good to have. And again, if I didn't, achieve that in my last year, again, I wouldn't have been kicking stones, but I'm glad I got to achieve that. And, considering that year before, won the chance of coming back, then playing on, and then getting 250 were, pretty slim. So
very slim.
So, just to get that was, was pretty special. And again, there's plenty of points in my career I probably thought that, I wouldn't even get 200, let alone 250.
To remain involved with the club as you are now, how important was that in your decision-making process? Because even though you've got the business, even though you've got a young family, you're a footy guy, mate. You really are. And to remain involved in some capacity, I would imagine, is important to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, well, in that last year, in the 2020 year, again, because the club, in terms of, the salary cap and where they're at, basically, I had to sign on and through a program, with NRL called the NRL Transition Program, where part of my wage got paid to actually work as, a 1 day a week as a education and wellbeing officer. So I actually, in my last year, started working, and basically all I had to do was just help mentor and guide a lot of the young players coming through, and I really enjoyed that. And seeing some of the guys that now, like a Jake Simkin, a Reece Hoffman, a Jock Madden, guys who, I could see Alex Seyfarth, these guys who I tried to, actively, go out and mentor and help. And I saw them grow throughout that 2020 year. And I'm like, just good kids, and I saw a lot of my sort of personality in them too as well when I was young. So
Nice.
I just thought, you know what, I'd love to be able to just stay around in some capacity, just to help those guys, like good people, as good guys at the club. I know we didn't have the success last year, and we didn't make the finals, but I just personally would like to help them grow, you know, as players. And if I can share anything that I've learnt that can help fast track their career, then, you know, I'd love to do that. And even all the other players as well, just share some of the things that I know help me have a long career. And if some of the guys can take that on board, then great. So, look, it wasn't, you know, sort of the decision was made. I was going to retire regardless, but you know, being able to do that and knowing that at this point, then by this stage, you know, the opportunity to then go straight into the business full time really excited me, because I've never had that opportunity to, you know, really day in, day out, really execute and do the things I wanted to do with the business. So that did excite me as well. So I knew that I couldn't really be there any more than sort of, you know, a small, you know, part or, you know, 1 day a week or whatever that may be, because I had other challenges and goals I wanted to do. But again, as you said, it's been my life for 15 years. So I still wanted to be able to give back in some way.
Through 15 years, when you're experiencing the highs or wiping the tears away through the lows, you've carried yourself in the most professional of ways on and off the field. And whilst the boots have been packed away, your role in our game hasn't. And to be honest, mate, I couldn't think of a better man to mentor the next generation. Chris Lawrence, you, sir, are a legend. The Legend Series is a deep dive not only into the athlete, but the man behind, celebrating successes, dealing with failure, and turning obstacles into challenges. It drops at the start of your week. Later in the week, the weekly Wodge is released. On any one episode, hear up to a dozen of the game's best, both former and current. We talk footy, we have a laugh as well. Segments, specials and special guests. It's the perfect way to kick off your footy weekend. Then on Sundays, one-on-one with not a footballer in sight. We chat with boxers, mixed martial artists and professional wrestlers, both past and present. The list of names featured reads like a who's who. Their stories simply amazing. Make sure you're following us on our social media pages, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, all at The Andy Raymond. And subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. That way you won't miss a thing. And before you go, we'd really love a 5-star rating and review on the podcast app you're currently listening on. It helps us spread the word and grow the brand as we look to bring you more. We're giving away an Unfiltered Truckers hat for the best weekly review too. Andy Raymond Unfiltered. It's a podcast like no other. It's unfiltered. Make sure you come back soon, legends.